Absolutely. Hands down. No problem.
As far as growth mindset goes, um, you have an agent that's experienced in final expense, senior market, life insurance sales. Would they be able to successfully add Medicare into their lineup and get it going this year?
Absolutely. Hands down. No problem. Their only limitation is going to be in their own mind.
Okay.
Somebody that decides that they're completely open to it, and that they're not just open to it, but excited about it, and understands the penny doubled a day every
Yeah.
day for 30 days is way better than 50 grand today. If they really understand how big the opportunity is. And I can tell you, there's people sinking millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions trying to get into our space right now because of how big the opportunity is. And so if you already have a book of final expense clients, you could easily reach out to them and say, hey, just so you know, Jill, I'm doing Medicare now, and I'd love to give you a no cost review. And if she's open to it, then you get her to sign a scope of appointment. But honestly, you could go, if they're your own client, you can go knock on the door to check on them. You're there, there's fiduciary responsibility to say, by the way, I do these services. And now there's no requirement for the timeline in which you would get that scope signed. Now, can you go knock on the door of somebody that you don't know and never asked information and say, here, sign the scope, I'm going to talk to you about Medicare? That's still illegal. You cannot do that. But if they're already your client, you could go and knock back on the door to check on them. Say, hey, Jill, remember me? And Jill's like, yeah, hey, come on in, Roger. I still got that life policy. You say, well, just so you know, I wanted to check on that, see if you had any other needs, but now I'm doing Medicare. So you could do it that way. You could call on them, get them to sign the text scope. There is a scope of appointment process to talk about a Medicare Advantage or a drug PDP Part D drug plan.
Okay.
But it can be done at the time of that sale. Now, the other side of that is if they're not a client, and how I was talking about how we have these massive amount of walk-ins. Well, if I just advertise generally and they walk into the office, boom, sign the scope and you're good to go. So you just can't, the rule is that a Medicare Advantage sale on its own should not be resulting in an unsolicited contact. So that means you're not allowed to just cold call people or cold door knock and get them to sign a scope of appointment and start talking about Medicare Advantage.
Gotcha.
Now, you could cold door knock or cold call and write a Medicare supplement. There's not any regulation tied to that. Not real regulation. It's more like final expense. It's state regulated.
Okay.
There's also not any regulation tied to doing that with final expense, right? So if you get that policy on the books, now they're a client, now you can pivot much easier, and there's not a lot of regulatory burden because they're already a client of yours.
And if they have a final expense lead that they're calling on, they can
So
have that. Go ahead.
if they have a final expense lead, that is a solicited contact. So you're there to talk about final expense, and you walk in the door and Jill says, I don't need life insurance. I didn't know what that was. I thought I want some help with my Medicare. What you're supposed to do would be, pivot and say, well, I can't talk to you about that right now. There's regulatory burden, but you could sign a scope of appointment and we could set a follow-up appointment and come back later.
Gotcha.
And that's a controversial topic. There are people that are going to tell you that you can't do that. But if you ask carrier representatives, they say you can. So there's some people that become the compliance police, even though the compliance police don't even exist. And they'll be like, you ever had somebody that says, the speed limit's 55, but you really shouldn't do more than 45? And you're like, why? Well, I heard the cops are stopping. No, you're making up laws that don't even exist. So, the rule is a Medicare Advantage sale on its own is not allowed to come off of an unsolicited contact. That doesn't mean that it had to be a solicited Medicare contact, but you also can't intentionally bait and switch.
Yeah.
So if you were all the time buying final expense leads, knocking on the door and be like, I don't even like life insurance, but here's a Medicare Advantage plan. Well, that's a bait and switch.
Yeah.
But if they're asking for it and you are writing life insurance or Medicare supplements, and then you're selling some Medicare Advantage, there's no intentional bait and switch. It just happens to be that plan is best for them. The regulation, this is a rule that everyone should think about. The regulation was never created to prohibit the agent from really helping the client. It was prohibited for agents ripping them off.
Yeah.
That's what the regulation was created for.
Correct.
So if a client's asking about it, or if you're looking at it and you're saying this person needs help with their Medicare Advantage plan, that regulation was not created that. So if you're going in every time going to Medicare Advantage and running life leads and the CMS says, but you've never sold a life policy, well, you're bait and switching. But if you're selling final expense regularly and that's coming up, that's not an intentional bait and switch. That's just identifying that the client needs help with that.
Yeah, and a lot of our leads and a lot of our agents that run final expense leads, they'll get that.
Oh, yes.
You know, do you guys also do Medicare? Because I need someone. I don't even know who my agent is. You know, they have an agent. They don't know who it is. So
they start popping out cards and they start handing you their Medicare cards and stuff and Medicare Advantage. They're like, I don't even know what this is. It may be life insurance. And you're like, no, that's your Medicare Advantage plan. And then they say, oh, that damn thing, my doctors won't even take that. Well, now you've identified that they have a problem. The regulation was not made to where you'd be like, well, I can't help you with that because the government says, screw you. You keep the plan that your doctors can't take. Even though I could technically help you with it, but I can't, because that's not why the regulation was created. The regulation was created to stop fraud and bait and switch. And if that's not what you're doing, then that's not what's, you're doing things applicably. You cannot cold door knock though, because that there was just too much of that going on when Medicare Advantage first came out. People would go and knock on doors and say, well, there's this new free supplement you can get. And they're like, free supplement, which is a completely illegal way to say it, by the way. Never say free when you're talking about a zero premium plan. But that's what was happening. And so this is the analogy they used to use when I was in the Marine Corps, saying what happened was one person shit their pants and now everybody has to wear a diaper. Okay. That's what regulation is. One person shits his pants. Now everybody has to wear a diaper. A few agents were doing really bad things and now everybody has to be punished for it.
Yep.
We learned something today.
Yes. And we are not sponsored by Depends.
Thanks guys for checking out our video. If you want to be the first to know when we drop new content or new videos, please hit the subscribe button right here. And then go ahead and check out our next one while you're at it.